My name is Colin Ashford. I'm 41 years old. I run a fire station in Nashville. And the night my wife told me she'd be at her friend Whitney's watching some movie, my phone buzzed with a photo of her on a rooftop bar downtown. A stranger's reflection caught in the glass right behind her. 2 days later, our bank flagged 2 cocktails at that same rooftop, same night she swore she was covering a coworker's shift at the store. I didn't say a word. I just kept my hands busy and started watching. 9 days after that, over a plate of chicken and rice, she told me a whole story about a team dinner that never happened. So I asked her one question. Did Whitney's flight get in okay for that trip to Memphis? Her face went still, the kind of still that tells you everything a person won't say out loud. You sound ridiculous right now, she said. Welcome back to Leo Narrations, where calm men finally stop absorbing what everybody else breaks. We tell stories about marriages, boundaries, and the kind of justice that never has to raise its voice to be final. If you've ever been the last one in the room to hear the truth, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from, and make sure you're subscribed before we start. Now let me tell you exactly how I found out, and exactly how I answered her. I worked 24 hours on and 48 off, and about a year and a half back I set up our phones so any picture either of us took landed in the same shared album automatically. It was a vacation thing, honestly. We'd gone to Gulf Shores for a long weekend, and neither of us wanted to text the other 40 pictures of the same stretch of sand one at a time. So I turned the setting on in about 10 seconds at a gas station and forgot it existed. That's the thing about small conveniences. You set them up once for a reason that makes sense at the time, and then you forget you ever flipped the switch until the day it flips something back at you. I was elbow deep in the medical bag on the engine, restocking gauze and checking expiration dates before a Wednesday night shift, when my phone buzzed with a photo I hadn't taken. My wife, cocktail glass in one hand, a skyline behind her through a wall of glass. The file carried a location tag, the way phones do now whether you ask them to or not, L.A. Jackson, 9:52 p.m. That morning, over coffee, she'd told me she'd be at Whitney's watching some movie about a wedding that falls apart before the vows. I stood there a second with a roll of gauze in my hand and didn't feel much of anything, if I'm honest. I finished loading the bag, checked the oxygen levels on the rig, and went about the shift, because a photo by itself isn't a conversation, and I've learned the hard way that your first read on a fire is usually the wrong one. You don't kick a door in before you know what's behind it. It wasn't always like this between us. 3 years back, maybe 4, she used to ride along to the grocery store on my nights off just so we'd have an extra hour together, and we'd stand in the cereal aisle arguing about nothing, laughing about it. I remember her holding up 2 boxes once, dead serious, asking which one said more about a person's character, and me telling her neither. They're both cornflakes with different mascots, and her saying that's exactly the kind of answer a man who alphabetizes his spice rack would give. She used to leave notes in my duffel bag before a 24 too. Something small, a candy bar taped to a sticky note that said, "Don't die. I like this apartment." I think about that note more than I probably should, especially on the nights when the version of her standing in my kitchen didn't seem to remember writing it. The 6 weeks before that photo showed up didn't look like a crisis from where I was standing. They looked like a woman who was tired, and I told myself that's all it was, because that's an easier thing to tell yourself at 11 at night than the alternative. She'd started leaving her phone face down on the counter, which she never used to do. She changed her passcode and didn't mention it, which she also never used to do. I only found out because I tried to check the time on it once and got locked out. She started sleeping on the far edge of the bed, a good 2 feet of cold sheet between us that hadn't been there before, and she flinched. Actually flinched. The one time I reached over to rub her shoulder after a bad shift. She came home twice from work dinners, smelling like a perfume I didn't remember buying her and couldn't place on any shelf in our bathroom. And the comments started too. Little digs, delivered in this bright, joking voice that wasn't actually joking. "You run this house like you're still on shift. You know that. You're so predictable. It's almost impressive." Once, halfway through loading the dishwasher, she said, "We get it, Colin. You like your systems." Like it was an insult instead of a fact. I took every one of those the way you take smoke leaking out from under a door on a call. You don't kick the door in yet. You just note where the heat's coming from, and you wait to see how it moves. 2 days after that first photo landed in our shared album, my phone buzzed again. A real-time spending alert on our joint checking account. I'd set that one up 8 months earlier, after somebody skimmed our card at a gas pump outside of Murfreesboro and helped themselves to $60 of gas that wasn't theirs. The alert flagged 2 cocktails and a shared appetizer plate, $29 and change, charged at 8:40 p.m. on a night she'd told me she was covering a co-worker's closing shift at the store. Same rooftop. Same skyline probably, though the alert doesn't send you a photo, just a number and a time. I stood in the kitchen with my phone in my hand and read that alert twice, then a third time, like rereading it might change what it said. Then I put it back in my pocket and finished making dinner, because I wasn't ready to be wrong about her yet, and I wasn't ready to be right either. Both of those felt like the same kind of falling. That Thursday we ate on the couch, which had become our normal over the past month. Real dinners at the table had quietly stopped happening, the way a habit dies without either of you deciding to kill it. She told me about a team happy hour, gave me more detail than I had asked for. Who ordered what, who told which joke about the regional numbers, how her manager kept buying rounds because the quarter had gone well. She laughed a beat too long at her own story, the kind of laugh that's doing work it shouldn't need to do. Twice she checked her phone under the throw blanket, thumb moving fast, the screen going dark the second I shifted my weight on the cushion next to her. "You good?" I asked, nodding at the phone. "Fine," she said. "Work stuff. Boring." She set it face down on her thigh like that settled it. I watched the television. I didn't ask a second question. I've found that people show you more of themselves when they don't think anybody's chasing them around the room for it. 2 days after that, my buddy Roy Pemberton, who works my same house and has for 6 years, showed me a picture over coffee in the day room. His fiancée Megan had posted it from a night out. Rooftop, string lights, the two of them grinning into the camera like people do. Behind them, caught in the glass railing the way a reflection catches things it wasn't invited to, was my wife, turned toward a man in a navy blazer, her hand resting easy on his forearm, the kind of touch you only give somebody you already trust with your weight. "Isn't that your wife?" Roy asked, not thinking a thing of it, just making conversation. "Small town, I swear." "Yeah," I said. "Guess it is." "You know the guy?" "No," I said. "Never seen him before in my life." Roy shrugged and went back to his coffee, and I sat there a while longer than the moment called for, running my thumb over the edge of the table like it might tell me something the picture hadn't already. A few nights later, alone in the station kitchen after a call that turned out to be nothing much, a smoke detector with a dying battery and an old man embarrassed he'd bothered us, I finally said the thing to myself plainly, out loud almost, just to hear how it sounded. I wasn't building a case anymore. I'd had enough for a case for a week and a half. What I was actually doing, standing there with a cup of bad coffee going cold in my hand, was deciding whether I still wanted to walk back into that house every third night off, or whether I was doing it out of habit. The way you keep driving a route home after the road's been closed for repairs, because your hands know the turns even after your head's caught up to the detour signs. I decided I didn't want a habit. I wanted the truth. Whatever it cost me, even if what it cost me was the house I used to like coming home to. 2 nights later I made dinner. Chicken, rice, green beans. Nothing that took effort, because my hands needed something to do and my head needed to be somewhere else while they did it. She came in late, hair done, makeup fresher than a 9-hour shift at the store should leave on anybody by 6 in the evening. She started a story before I'd even asked how her day went, one of those long ones with a built-in excuse woven through it. A whole regional team dinner, she said, celebrating a strong quarter, out at some new place downtown her boss had picked. She named 3 co-workers I'd met exactly once each at a company picnic 2 summers back, like the names alone would prove she'd been somewhere real. I let her get most of the way through it. Green beans, more green beans, a comment about how tired I always looked lately, how I should be more supportive when she needed to decompress after a long week. That word, decompress, always seems to show up right before something that isn't true. I set my fork down. "Did Whitney's flight get in okay?" I asked. "For that distributor thing in Memphis?" She blinked, just a half second too long. "She texted me. She's fine." That was the wrong answer, and she had no way of knowing it was the wrong answer, because Whitney wasn't in Memphis for any distributor conference. I knew that because I'd emailed Whitney 2 weeks earlier about picking up a cake for my mother's birthday, a favor she does every year since her bakery's 10 minutes from my mother's place. And her out-of-office reply said she'd be traveling out of the country visiting her sister back the following Monday. I hadn't gone digging for that. It landed in my inbox on its own, same as the photo, same as the bank alert. The whole month had been handing me things I hadn't gone looking for. "Funny," I said. Her auto-reply said Portugal. Her face didn't come apart right then. It went still instead, which in my experience is its own kind of coming apart, just slower. Maybe I've got the trip mixed up, she said. Why does it even matter where Whitney is? It doesn't, I said. Not by itself. She reached for her water glass, gave her hand something to do besides sit still on the table. You've been so strange lately, distant, checked out. And now you're grilling me about my friend's flight schedule like I'm on trial for something. I asked one question, I said. It feels like an interrogation. Only if there's something to find. She laughed, short and sharp, no real humor in it at all. You sound ridiculous right now, you know that? This whole vibe you've got going tonight. I didn't answer that one. I picked my fork back up and let the silence sit across the table from her the way you let a wall cool before you put your bare hand against it. Later, in the kitchen, she was scrubbing a pan that didn't need scrubbing, running the water longer than the job called for. I leaned against the counter and watched her do it. Her phone sat face down by the sink, screen dark, the way it lived there permanently now. There's nothing going on, she said, before I'd said a single word. You're spiraling over nothing, and honestly, it's exhausting. I shouldn't have to defend a work dinner to you. Nobody asked you to defend it. You're doing it right now, standing there like that. I've been cold for months. That's the story tonight? I asked. And whatever this actually is, that's on me? Her jaw tightened, and for a second, the anger in her looked real instead of performed. Maybe if you were around more, actually present instead of running this house like it's one of your calls, we wouldn't be standing here. I let that land without fighting it, because some of it was probably true. 24 on and 48 off doesn't leave a lot of room for date nights, and I've never pretended otherwise. But it wasn't the whole truth, and we both knew it wasn't, and neither of us said so out loud. She softened her voice then, the way she does whenever anger stops earning her anything. She crossed the kitchen, put a hand flat against my chest. Come here. You don't have to do this whole thing. You're allowed to just trust me, you know. I looked at her for a second, maybe two, and something in me that had been holding its breath for 6 weeks straight finally let it out, slow and quiet, no heat left in it at all. Go ahead, I said. Text him. Tell him you're free, starting tomorrow. Her hand slid off my chest like it had lost its grip on the whole idea of me standing there. Her eyes went to the phone by the sink before her fingers caught up to the thought. She grabbed for it too fast, and it slipped, clattered against the counter edge, and skidded across the tile, landing face up and useless between us. No, she said, voice smaller than I'd ever once heard from her. Please, that's not... No, Colin. I'm not asking you a question. You're overreacting, she said, but there was no real fight left behind it, just noise trying to fill a hole that had opened up too fast for her to cover. Or I'm reacting on time, I said, and walked past her, down the hall. Nobody yelled. No door got slammed anywhere in that house. I went into the bedroom, cracked the window a few inches, and sat on the edge of the bed listening to the ordinary sounds of the street. A car somewhere down the block. Somebody's dog barking twice and giving up. The whole world going on without checking in on either of us. She hovered in the doorway a while, phone back in her hand now, not saying anything else, like she was waiting for me to hand her some instructions on how to undo what had just happened. Eventually, I heard her go back down the hall. Later, out in the garage, I swapped the batteries in both smoke detectors, a job that needed exactly zero thought from me, and let the house go quiet the way a room does after a fire's finally out. Not peaceful exactly, just done producing smoke. I slept fine, which surprised me a little at the time. Alarm went off at 5:30 like always. I was at the gym by 6, home for coffee by 7, and before my next shift I sat down at the kitchen table and called the credit union. Dropped our daily withdrawal limit on the joint account to $60 total. Rerouted every fraud alert to my email only, cutting hers out of the loop entirely. Called the card company and had her pulled as an authorized user on the credit card we'd shared for 6 years. Killed the overdraft protection, which had quietly covered more of her impulse purchases over the years than either of us probably wanted to admit out loud. Anything else on the account you'd like adjusted, Mr. Ashford? The rep asked, friendly, half bored, reading off a script. That covers it, I said. For now. By 7:40 that morning, the first decline notice hit my phone. A TM near her office, $60 requested, already used elsewhere apparently, because it bounced clean. 5 minutes later, a second attempt at a different branch across town. A third, 20 minutes after that, from a gas station kiosk on her usual route to work. People don't make the same mistake 3 times inside of half an hour. People test a fence to see whether it's actually holding a charge. The texts started around 8. soft at first. Can we talk? Something's wrong with the card. I think the bank made an error. Then confusion dressed up as concern. Why would you touch our accounts without even telling me first? Then straight anger. No dressing at all. You're blowing this whole thing up over nothing, you know that. I made eggs, left the phone face down on the counter the way she used to leave hers, and ate breakfast standing up at the sink. By 9 that morning, I was downtown on Church Street, in a law office that smelled like carpet cleaner and printer toner, sitting across from an attorney who spoke in flat, useful sentences and never once asked how any of this made me feel. We'll file for a temporary restraining order on shared assets today, she said, sliding a legal pad toward herself. Request exclusive use of the house, exclusive use of your truck, and standard language preventing either party from draining or hiding funds, while the court sorts the rest out. We'll also start a documented inventory of anything with real value. Jewelry, tools, electronics, so nobody's arguing 6 months from now about who owned what. Fine, I said. For service, I'd suggest her workplace lobby, public enough that nobody can claim later it never happened, not so public that it turns into a spectacle for her coworkers to watch. Fine, I said again. She looked up from the pad. You understand this moves fast once it starts. Faster than most people expect and slower than most people want. Both at once. I understand, I said. I'd rather it be fast and boring than slow and loud. That's the right instinct, she said, and got back to writing. I spent the next 2 hours on the office's guest Wi-Fi handling what she called the loose ends, called my department's payroll office first. I need my direct deposit moved to a new account starting next cycle, I told the woman in HR, a person I'd talked to maybe twice in 9 years, both times about dental coverage. Old account stays open, I just need mine going somewhere new. Any particular reason so I note it correctly? She asked, not prying, just doing her job. Personal, I said. Should be all that's needed. That's plenty, she said, and read the confirmation number back to me twice. Then I emailed the auto insurer and had my wife dropped as a listed driver on my truck, effective that day. Emailed the homeowner's policy provider next and requested both signatures be required for any future changes. No exceptions, no verbal approvals over the phone. None of it took longer than a phone call and a signature line. It's strange how fast a life can be rewired once you stop asking permission from the person it used to include, and stranger still, how none of the people on the other end of those calls asked me a single question I couldn't answer in 4 words or less. Around noon, the tone in her texts shifted again. The way weather shifts when a front finally rolls through. I can't believe you're doing this without even talking to me first. Then, 20 minutes later, softer. I'll go to counseling. Whatever you want. Just stop the paperwork, please. Then, an hour after that, sharp again. You've humiliated me, you understand that? Bringing a lawyer into this like I'm some kind of criminal. Then quieter, almost sad, like she'd worn herself out cycling through the other 3. I don't even recognize you right now. Is that supposed to make me feel something? I remember thinking, reading it standing in the parking lot outside the law office. It didn't. I didn't answer any of it directly. My attorney had already given me the only sentence I needed for situations like this one. Counsel will handle it from here on out. She called twice more that afternoon. I let both ring through to voicemail without looking at the screen longer than it took to see her name on it. A third call came an hour later, and that time I answered just long enough to say the same sentence out loud instead of typing it, then hung up before she could argue with it. At 4:12 that afternoon, the process server sent 2 words, service complete. No color commentary, no details about how it went. Just done, which turned out to be its own kind of beautiful. 5 minutes later she called. I let it ring itself out. The voicemail she left ran a minute and change, shaky at the start, angrier through the middle, back to pleading by the end, the whole emotional weather system compressed into 80 seconds. I listened to it once, standing in my own kitchen, and deleted it without saving a copy. Next morning she showed up on the porch at 8 sharp, sunglasses on. Even though the sky was overcast, voice pitched soft and reasonable like she'd rehearsed the tone in the car. My neighbor, Denise Carver, a retired schoolteacher who'd agreed to stand witness for any exchanges at the house, stepped out onto her own porch next door and just stood there with her arms crossed, saying nothing, which somehow did more work than a speech would have. I'm here for my things, my wife said. Pick up windows tomorrow, 10 o'clock, I said. It's on the list taped inside the door. Today isn't on it. You're really doing this. The schedule, the lawyer, the whole production. She let that sentence hang there a second, like it might embarrass me into folding. I am. She tried the softer angle next, chin dropped, voice lower. We built a whole life together, Colin. You're going to throw all of it away over a misunderstanding? If it's a misunderstanding, I said, the schedule won't cost you a single thing. I'll see you at 10 tomorrow. She stood there another few seconds like she was waiting for the porch itself to argue on her behalf, then turned and left without another word. Denise watched her go the whole way down the walk, slow, the way you watch somebody pick the wrong one of two doors. That afternoon at the station, Roy caught me in the day room with his phone already turned my direction before I'd even sat down. Man, you need to see this. It was a public post from the guy in the navy blazer. Dean Holt, it turned out, once somebody bothered to actually look him up. A distributor rep who covered our part of the state out of an office in Knoxville. The post was 5 weeks old. A family trip to the Great Smoky Mountains, his wife, and a 2-year-old in matching flannel. A caption about a recent promotion keeping him on the road more than ever, but always home in time for bedtime. 5 weeks old, which meant he'd already had that whole life. The wife, the kid, the flannel. The entire time he was telling my wife whatever he'd been telling her at a rooftop bar downtown. He wasn't leaving anybody. He'd never once planned to. Guy's married, said one of the other captains, leaning over Roy's shoulder to get a look. Been married a while too, from the looks of that album. Kid's not exactly a newborn. How'd you even land on his page? I asked Roy. Megan follows him, Roy said. He does business with her company sometimes, shows up in their event photos. She scrolled back a ways after she saw your wife in that reflection and got curious, same as anybody would. That tracked. My wife's own company had tagged Dean Holt in a handful of posts over the past year, conference booths and regional kickoffs, his face right there in public the whole time for anybody who bothered to look twice. Nobody had gone hunting for him. He'd just never been as hidden as he probably thought he was. I didn't feel triumphant reading any of it. Mostly I just felt tired for her, in a distant sort of way. The way you feel tired for a stranger who made a bad trade without checking the fine print first. She'd blown up an actual marriage chasing something that had never been real to begin with, and there was no version of that math that came out even. The first pickup window went exactly the way the schedule said it would. Basics only: clothes, toiletries, her laptop, a couple of pairs of shoes. She tried to slide a jewelry box into the tote that wasn't anywhere on the list, and I shook my head. That's inventory, I said. After the hearing, not before. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? She said, folding a sweater with more force than folding requires. It's order, I said. Not humiliation. Cruelty was the 6 weeks of lying that made this necessary. She stood at the counter a while after that, running her fingers along the edge of it like the granite might argue her case better than she could on her own. He stopped answering, she said finally, quiet, mostly to herself. 2 days ago, nothing. Just gone. He didn't stop, I said. He moved on with the family he already had before he ever met you. You were never the destination. You were somewhere he stopped for gas. She didn't say anything else after that. She packed the rest of the tote in silence and left when the hour was up, and neither of us said goodbye. My brother called that Saturday, same as most Saturdays, asking if I wanted to get out to the lake before the weather turned. I almost said no out of habit, the way you say no to things when your week's been heavy, then caught myself and said yes instead. We spent the morning on his boat not talking about any of it much, just casting lines and complaining about the Titans' offensive line, and it was the first stretch of hours in 3 weeks where my chest didn't feel like it was holding something up. On the drive back he asked, careful, not pushing, if I was doing all right. I told him I was doing exactly as well as a man should be doing who finally stopped lying to himself about his own house. He didn't say anything else. He just nodded and turned the radio back up, which was its own kind of answer. Our hearing landed on a Thursday morning at the Davidson County Chancery Court downtown, in a room that smelled like every courtroom smells, old wood and cold coffee. My attorney laid it out in about 4 minutes flat. Service completed without incident, spending restrictions already holding for weeks, an itemized and supervised pickup schedule, functioning without a single missed window, a pattern of inconsistent statements and unexplained spending pointing toward conduct outside the marriage. Her attorney pushed back on the timeline for splitting the retirement accounts, asked for a faster resolution than the temporary order allowed. The judge glanced over the numbers on the page, said the current structure would hold as filed, and set a date for the next stage. 10 minutes, maybe less, start to finish. No speeches, No raised voices. Just a ruling, a signature, and a court reporter typing the whole thing into something that would outlast either of our memories of it. Her attorney tried one more angle before the judge cut things off, arguing that the temporary spending restriction was unreasonably harsh, given there'd been no formal finding of wrongdoing yet, only circumstantial financial patterns. My attorney answered without raising her voice an inch. Your Honor, the restriction protects assets belonging to both parties equally. If nothing improper occurred, nothing is lost by waiting for the record to confirm that. The judge agreed, made a note, and moved the calendar along like a man who'd heard the same argument 1,000 times and expected to hear it 1,000 more before he retired. Outside on the sidewalk after, she stood by her attorney's car while I waited for mine to pull up. Our eyes caught for a second. No more. Whatever had been burning in her a month earlier had gone all the way out somewhere between the ATM declines and that photo from the Smoky Mountains. What was left looked like someone doing math from scratch on what she actually had left standing under her. Her attorney touched her elbow and steered her toward the passenger door before either of us said a word. The second pickup window 3 weeks after that ran quieter than the first. She arrived early, no sunglasses this time, and didn't try to slip anything extra past the list. I'm ashamed, she said, standing in the hallway while Denise waited by the front door, arms still crossed the same way they'd been crossed a month earlier. He lied to me about who he even was. I was stupid enough to believe every word of it. I pulled the labeled box of keepsakes out of the hall closet, the ones we'd already agreed she could take without argument. Photos from before things went sideways, a couple of paperbacks, a sweater from a road trip we took early on, back when neither of us needed a printed schedule taped to a door just to talk to each other like people. These are yours, I said. The rest gets sorted out after the final hearing. She held the sweater against her chest for a second, like it weighed more than the rest of the box put together, then set it down gently on top and finished packing. At the door, she stopped with the last box balanced against her hip. Please, she said, and didn't finish the sentence, like she wasn't entirely sure herself what word came after it. Forgive, maybe, or undo, or just stay. Respect comes first, I said. Everything else falls apart without it holding the frame up. I closed the door behind her and turned the lock, and the click of it sounded, for the first time in a long time, like a sound that belonged to me alone. About a week after that, my attorney forwarded a letter, 4 pages, handwritten, sent through her own counsel the proper way. I read it once at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold beside it. It started with shame, moved through regret, and ended with a list of promises. Counseling, distance from anybody who'd blurred the lines she'd let get blurred, a fresh start somewhere she could stop being reminded of who she'd been for those 6 weeks. I could see the effort in every line of it. I could also see the timeline underneath the effort, the one made of dates and charges and a phone slipping out of a hand. And that timeline never once changed its story no matter how many drafts she'd clearly gone through to write that letter. I asked my attorney to send back 2 sentences. I hope you find the life you're describing. This one's already found. The divorce took 4 more months to go all the way final, which is about standard for Tennessee even when nobody's fighting hard over the finer points. The temporary order held the whole stretch. House and truck stayed mine. Accounts stayed separated, all contact routed through the attorneys. By the time the final paperwork came through, her calls had stopped completely. A mutual friend mentioned once, in passing, that she'd moved into a 1-bedroom off Nolensville Pike. Her social media, which used to be full of captions about choosing herself and living her truth out loud, thinned down to almost nothing. A coffee mug here, a sunset there, comment sections nobody bothered filling in anymore. Freedom gets expensive fast once nobody else is quietly covering the tab for it. Work found its own rhythm again, the way it does once you stop bringing static home with you. My crew stopped studying my face for trouble every time I walked into the day room. Roy and I got back to arguing about nothing over bad coffee, the way we always had before any of this started. I started staying late some nights, not because I was avoiding an empty house, but because I actually wanted to be there, running drills, checking gear, doing the job the way it deserves to be done. I saw her once more, almost a year later, in the parking lot of a Kroger on Gallatin Pike. She looked smaller around the eyes than I remembered her, the way people do after a stretch of learning things the hard way, on their own, with nobody covering for them anymore. She opened her mouth like she might say something, then didn't. I nodded once, the way you nod at somebody from a life you used to live in a different house, and kept walking toward my truck. A shopping cart's wheel squeaked against the asphalt somewhere behind us, giving us both something else to listen to besides each other, and I was grateful for it, honestly. On the drive home that day, radio off, windows cracked, I thought about how people talk about revenge like it has to be loud to count for anything. Slammed doors, raised voices, some big scene everybody remembers for years afterward. It never worked that way for me, not once through the whole thing. Mine looked like a spreadsheet, a locked account, a schedule taped inside a door, a judge reading numbers off a page in under 10 minutes flat. Quiet, and about as satisfying, in the end, as watching a fire finally go out on its own because you cut off whatever it had been quietly feeding on the whole time. These days my alarm still goes off at 5:30, same as it always has. I'm still at the gym by 6, still at the station every third day, still the guy my crew looks to when a call goes sideways and somebody needs a level head running the scene instead of a loud one. I call my brother most Saturdays now, not just the ones after bad weeks. The house holds its shape. Nothing extra sitting in it, nothing hiding under a blanket, nothing dimming the second I walk into a room anymore. Roy asked me a while back, over bad coffee in the day room, same as always, whether I figured I'd ever try the whole marriage thing again someday. I told him I probably would, eventually, when it made sense. He asked what that would take. I said the same thing it always should have taken the first time. Somebody who doesn't need a schedule taped to a door to tell the truth. He laughed and said that sounded like a low bar. I told him it's the only bar that's ever actually mattered, and everything people dress it up with afterward is just decoration. A fire doesn't need your anger to go out. It just needs you to stop feeding it.